The trade station drifted in the black silence of space, its silver hull glowing faintly against the scattered starlight. For hundreds of years, this place had been a safe hub where dozens of alien races came to trade metals, spices, technologies, and whispers of politics. The station's corridors were filled with slow, peaceful movement merchants sliding past one another. The hum of translation devices filling the air with a background murmur of mixed voices. No one expected trouble here. Trouble belonged to the war zones far away, not this distant outpost. But trouble was already on its way, streaking through the void like a silent predator with only one target, far beyond the reach of the station's scanners. A small craft tore through the dark. Its hull was blackened, scarred with fresh burns, and its shape was unlike anything on any registry. It didn't belong to any alien fleet, and it didn't belong to the peaceful traders who docked at the station. The ship looked alive, its sleek metal plates flexing slightly, as if breathing, and faint red pulses ran through lines along its sides like veins feeding some hidden heart. Inside, a man sat strapped into the pilot's chair, his face illuminated by the deep crimson light of the ship's controls. His eyes were fixed on the growing speck of the station ahead. There was no hesitation in his gaze. His name was Commander Rourke Kane, and he had come to deliver a message. He didn't plan to send that message through a diplomat. He didn't plan to send it with polite words, carefully wrapped in political caution. His message would be burned into the memory of everyone who saw it, etched in fire and wreckage so deep that even the most distant star systems would whisper about it for generations. Rourke's jaw tightened as the ship's AI whispered in his mind, its voice low and almost human. Target acquired. Distance closing. Do you wish to proceed? He didn't even answer. The AI didn't need words. It could feel the storm inside. Him could sense the rage boiling in his thoughts. The Dominion had thought they could strike without consequence. They had thought the humans were like any other species, too slow, too cautious, too bound by treaties to respond with real force. They had been wrong. The Dominion attack on Europa Outpost was supposed to be a warning shot, a reminder that Earth's colonies existed at the mercy of greater powers. But the attack had done more than destroy an outpost. It had destroyed Rourke Kane's life. His wife, his daughter, and his younger brother had all been stationed there. The official report from the Dominion claimed that the deaths were unfortunate. Collateral damage. In Rourke's mind, those words were a death sentence for them. The United Earth government had been clear. There would be no retaliation. They would seek answers through the Galactic Council. There would be inquiries, discussions, and compromises. There would be months of talk while the blood of Europa's dead cooled in the cold vacuum. Rourke had sat in that council chamber, hearing those words, feeling the heat in his chest grow until he thought he would burn from the inside out. And then he had walked out without saying a word. By the next day, he was gone along with a ship that should never have left Earth's deepest vaults. Project Revenant was not a weapon in the traditional sense. It was something darker. A human mind linked directly to an adaptive war machine, designed to respond instantly to the pilot's instincts, especially aggression. It amplified the things most species feared in humanity: speed, unpredictability, and the ability to keep fighting long past the point when survival should be impossible. The Revenant had been banned even before it was completed. Wanted something in the galaxy that could act without restraint, without the cold breaks of reason. But now, sitting in that blackened cockpit, Rourke had become one with it. His grief had fused with its systems, and together they were a single being with only one purpose. The station ahead was quiet and unaware. To Rourke, it looked like a nested the same kind of vermin who had taken Europa from him. His hands hovered over the controls. Though he didn't really need to touch them anymore, the ship could feel every shift of his mind. As the Revenant entered scanner range, the station's operators noticed the incoming vessel. A handful of alerts blinked across their consoles. The craft didn't respond to hails. It didn't slow down. Didn't match docking protocols. Unidentified. Craft, the station's automated voice called over the open channel. Reduce speed and transmit clearance codes, or you will be intercepted. Inside the Revenant, Rourke leaned forward slightly. Transmit, he said softly. The AI understood. It didn't send a clearance code. It sent a simple, universal signal. His voice played across every comm system on the station. Every screen, every translator chip, and every ear. You took everything from me. The station's security chief, a tall, scaled alien with sharp yellow eyes, froze. There was no demand, no explanation, no threat in the words, just pure intent. The kind that made the air feel colder. He barked in order to scramble the stations. Defense drones. But it was already too late. The Revenant moved like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. Its engines didn't flare in long, predictable trails. They spat bursts of force that seemed to bend physics, snapping the ship from one vector to another in impossible jerks. The first defense drone tried to lock on, but before its targeting system could finish, the Revenant's hull shifted, a panel opening to release a thin spike of energy that cut through the drone's core like a scalpel. The drone spun away, lifeless, as the Revenant surged forward. In the docking bays, merchants screamed and scrambled for cover. Cargo crates toppled as the black ship sliced through the station's outer ring, tearing open bulkheads with precision shots. Rourke wasn't. Firing at random, every shot crippled systems power relays, communication nodes, shield emitters, making sure that the station couldn't call for help before he was finished. His voice came again over the comms, calm and cold. "Remember, Europa."
I know.
Panic had overtaken the station. Security tried to organize a counterattack, but the Revenants seemed to know their every move before they made it. It wasn't just reading their signals, it was reading them. The neural link let Rourke feel the battle the way others might feel the shift of wind before a storm. The ship responded instantly, dancing between weapons fire and returning it with lethal accuracy. Somewhere deep inside, Rourke knew the people here weren't all responsible for Europa. Many of them were just traders, travelers, civilians.
Out.
But his rage didn't distinguish between soldiers and bystanders. Dominion had touched his world. Anything connected to them would burn. In the station's command center, alarms screamed as the power grid began to collapse. The chief of security shouted orders to evacuate, but the docking bays were already compromised. The only option was to send escape pods into the void and hope they drifted far enough before the Revenant caught them. Away into the darkness, Rourke saw them. For a brief moment he hesitated. Then he turned his ship away from them, focusing back on the station itself. The AI registered the decision, but didn't question it. The pods weren't his target. Not today, as the Revenant cut through the station's central spine. Sparks and atmosphere vented into space, forming glittering clouds that spun slowly in zero gravity. From a distance, the scene might have looked beautiful like frozen fireworks, blooming silently in the dark. But for those inside, it was the end. When the last of the station's defenses fell silent, Rourke's voice returned one final time to the survivors huddled in whatever pressurized pockets still remained. "Tell the Dominion," he said. "I'm coming for them." Then the Revenant turned sharply and vanished into the void, its engines leaving no trail for anyone to follow. The station floated in ruin, drifting aimlessly in the shadow of the nearby planet. Word of the attack would spread fast. Every trader who had escaped would carry the story. A human in a living ship, moving with impossible speed, eyes filled with something more dangerous than hate. In the silence of space, far from the wreckage, Rourke sat back in the pilot's chair. His breathing was steady. His hands didn't shake. Inside, the rage was still there, but now it burned colder, sharper. The Revenant whispered to him, "One target down, many to go." He didn't smile. There was nothing to smile about. The galaxy thought it understood war. They had no idea what was coming. The galaxy had always been vast, endless, and cold. It swallowed empires and gave birth to them in the same breath. But now, for the first time in centuries, there was a sense of unease across the stars, a growing whisper that something dangerous had been unleashed. That whisper carried a name: the human. No one in the outer sectors spoke it loudly. They didn't have to. The stories were enough. A lone figure who walked through fire, who survived wounds that would kill any other, who had eyes that seemed to burn with something no alien race could understand. rage. Not the blind rage of a beast, but a sharp, calculated fury, the kind that turned a single person into a weapon. The Council's high command didn't believe in whispers. They believed in orders, in fleets, in weapons that could erase moons. They didn't believe in the myth of an unstoppable human. But myths had a way of growing teeth, and now even they were forced to acknowledge that this one was real. Somewhere, out there in the deep void between the war fronts, a single human had broken through their lines, destroyed a dreadnought, and vanished. That was not chance. That was intent. The Council's supreme executor stood in the war chamber, surrounded by admirals and intelligence chiefs. The chamber was dim, the walls alive with holographic maps of shifting battlefronts. The executor's long fingers tapped the arm of the central command chair as he studied the latest report. Mining outposts gone, not just destroyed, but erased. No bodies, no debris, only silence in the combs. The outpost had been guarded by one of their elite hunter units. No distress call was ever sent. It was as if death had moved so fast they didn't even see it coming. This human, the executor finally said, his voice cold and clipped, is no longer a rogue combatant. He is a destabilizing factor, a living weapon. He turned his narrow eyes toward the intelligence chief. Find him. Hunt him. Break him. Orders spread through the fleets like a ripple through water. Hunter-killer squadrons were dispatched to the unaligned sectors, patrols doubled, informants paid triple. Any ship that had even the faintest trace of human technology in its engine signatures was flagged. Across the stars the hunt began, but the human Cade was not running. Not yet. He was moving, yes, but always toward something, never away. The alien fleet searched the void, but they didn't understand that he was choosing his battles. Each strike was not random, it was a message. He left behind scenes of perfect destruction. Weapons caches burned to molten slag, command ships gutted from the inside, communications relays fried so completely they could never be repaired. And he never stayed long enough to be caught. Cade understood the power of fear. The Council thought they were the only ones who could wage psychological warfare, but they had never dealt with a human like him. Every time he struck, whispers spread, faster than light. Entire garrisons refused to go out on patrol without reinforcement. Pilots checked the dark corners of their ships before sleeping. Commanders began to argue over who would have the misfortune of being assigned to the hunt. The more they chased him, the more mistakes they made. Entire squadrons overextended their patrol routes, fuel reserves dwindled, and sensor crews started reporting phantom contacts. But the Council couldn't stop. The longer they failed to catch him, the weaker they looked in the eyes of the galaxy. Other oppressed worlds were watching, and Cade's defiance was like a spark in dry grass. Resistance cells began to rise again in sectors that had been silent for decades. Still, the Council did not underestimate him entirely. They brought in one of their most feared hunters, Admiral Sychron of the Bloodborne Fleet. Sychron was a strategist who had ended rebellions before they had even begun. His fleets were made of black armored ships with stealth holes and sensor jammers, so advanced they could vanish from sight even when only a few kilometers away. If anyone could track the human, it was Sychron, and so began the deadliest game of predator and prey the galaxy had ever seen. For 3 weeks, Sychron studied Cade's movements, predicting where he would strike next. He laid trap sensor mines, disguised as debris fields, false distress signals from abandoned freighters, ambush fleets hidden in asteroid belts. But each time, Cade seemed to know. He would appear just outside the trap, destroy something vital, and disappear into the void before Sychron's forces could engage. What Sychron didn't know was that Cade was studying him in return. Every trap, every maneuver, every choice the Admiral made, Cade learned from it. He mapped out the fleet patterns, tracked supply routes, and began to see the cracks in the Bloodborne Fleet's armor. And then, one night cycle, in the black void of Sector 91, Cade made his move. It began with a stolen transmission. Sychron's fleet was resupplying at an isolated fueling station, far from the main war front. The station's defenses were minimal. It was supposed to be a hidden stop. Had found it. He approached in silence, his ship's hull painted with thermal masking that made him invisible to scanners. He drifted closer, closer, until the station loomed like a dark city in space. Inside, alien crews went about their work, unaware that death had arrived. Cade boarded the station alone. No squad, no backup, just him and his rifle. He moved like a shadow through the metal corridors, each step calculated, each turn memorized. The first guards never saw him, neither did the second wave. By the time the alarm was raised, it was already too late. Cade didn't just destroy the fueling station, he turned it into a message. The main reactor went critical in under 5 minutes, the explosion ripping through Cycron's docked fleet like a blade. When the fireball faded, half the bloodborne fleet was gone. The rest scattered, their formations broken. Cycron survived, but his pride did not. For the first time in his career, he had been outplayed. Cade left a single transmission. For the Admiral before vanishing again, for words. It's burned into the data core of the wreckage. You're the prey now. The galaxy felt the shockwave not just of the explosion, but of what it meant. A single human had crippled one of the Council's deadliest fleets and walked away. For oppressed worlds, it was hope. For the Council, it was humiliation. And for Cycron, it was personal. From that day forward, the hunt changed. It was no longer about orders or strategy. It was about vengeance. And vengeance, Cade knew, could make even the deadliest predator careless. The debris from the destroyed fueling station still drifted in the cold dark when Admiral Cycron swore his oath. He stood on the shattered bridge of his command ship, the black void outside littered with the burning remains of his fleet. Dared speak to him. No one dared move. The Admiral's breathing was slow, but his eyes burned with a venom no alien under his command had ever seen before. Cade had humiliated him not in battle, but in a way that gnawed at a commander's soul. He hadn't been beaten by a superior force or overwhelmed by numbers. He'd been out-hot. That to Cycron was worse than death. He would not rest until the human was dead. For 3 days. The bloodborne fleet vanished from the public eye. No patrols, no transmissions. It was as if they had retreated into the dark to lick their wounds. But the truth was far more dangerous. They were preparing something. Cycron didn't just want to kill the human. He wanted to draw him into a place where escape was impossible. He began by spreading bait. Small Council supply convoys were deliberately left lightly guarded, communications relays transmitted in unsecured codes, high-value cargo ships traveled predictable routes through the outer systems. Any resistance fighter would have seen it as an opportunity. Any predator would smell blood. In the water, Cade saw it too. But he didn't move immediately. He waited, watching the pattern unfold. The traps were too good. Each convoy was large enough to be worth hitting, but small enough to make the ambush tempting. Cade knew this was Cycron's work. The Admiral was trying to lead him somewhere. The question was where. For Cade, the answer came when his sensors picked up a convoy broadcasting emergency calls from the edge of a dead system. The signal was weak, broken by static, but the voice was desperate, a mining ship under attack. Requesting help from anyone? No coordinates for a fleet. No sign of nearby warships. Too perfect, he could ignore it, should ignore it. But something in his chest, something older than this war, wouldn't let him. Cade had seen enough colonies burn to know what a real distress call sounded like. And if it was a trap, well, sometimes you had to step into the jaws of the beast. To kill it, he plotted a course. The dead system was exactly that, cold, empty, and silent. The sun was a burned-out husk, its planets frozen in endless night. As Cade's ship drifted closer to the signal source, the mining vessel came into view. It was massive, its hull scarred from years of work in asteroid belts. Lights flickered weakly along its spine, and the distress beacons still pulsed. No enemy. Ships in sight. To quiet. Cade powered down his weapons and approached slowly. His instincts screamed at him, but he kept moving. When he was close enough, he activated the boarding clamps and crossed over. The air inside the mining vessel was cold and metallic, carrying the faint smell of burned circuits. His boots echoed in the silence. No crew, not a single body. Not even signs of struggle? That's when the doors slammed shut. The sound was like the closing of a tomb. Cade spun, rifle ready, but the bulkhead was already sealed with reinforced plating. The lights above flickered once, and died, plunging him into darkness. Somewhere deep in the ship, metal groaned. Footsteps heavy, deliberate echoed through the corridors. They weren't trying to hide. Cycron's voice came over the ship's comms, cold and sharp like a blade. You've been difficult to catch. Human. But the hunt ends here. From the shadows ahead, the first shape emerged, tall, armored in black plating with a visor glowing red. Then another, and another. Soon the corridor was full of them. Cycron's personal kill squad, the Bloodborne. Hunters. They were bred for war, trained to fight in zero gravity, and equipped with weapons designed specifically to kill human soldiers. Cade didn't hesitate. The first shot dropped the lead hunter instantly. The second tore through another's chest plate. He moved fast, never staying in one place long enough for them to get a clear shot. But for every one he dropped, two more emerged from the darkness. Corridors twisted like a maze, forcing him deeper into the vessel. His rifle clicked empty, and he switched to his sidearm. Then that was gone too, forcing him to draw the combat blade strapped to his leg. The fights became brutal and close metal. On metal, breath on breath, sparks lit the dark as he cut down another hunter, only to take a glancing blow from a shock baton that left his arm numb. Cycron's voice echoed again, calm and taunting. You fight well, human, but you are still only one. Cade didn't answer. Words were wasted breath. He moved again. Following the faint vibration under his boots, the sound of the ship's main engines. If he could reach engineering, he could turn the trap inside out. The hunters followed, their footsteps relentless. Twice he ducked through maintenance shafts. Twice they tried to cut him off. Each time, he stayed ahead by seconds. When he burst into the engineering deck, the place was a cathedral of machine-stowering coolant towers. Acid plasma conduits. And the glowing heart of the reactor itself. Perfect. He crossed to the control panel and began rerouting the power grid. Alarms blared as systems overloaded. Sparks rained from the ceiling. The hunters poured into the room, weapons ready, but now the space worked against them. The narrow catwalks and roaring machinery gave Cade cover, and he moved like a shadow, striking and vanishing. One by one, the hunters fell. Some to his blade, others to the sudden bursts of plasma as he overloaded conduits near their positions. The last one lunged at him from behind, but Cade caught the movement in the reflection of a coolant pipe and turned, driving his blade up under the armor's chin, and then the reactor warning changed. The hum of the ship deepened, turning into a rising howl. The mining vessel was seconds from overload. Cade didn't waste another moment. He sprinted through the smoke and fire, back toward the docking clamps. The corridors were collapsing around him, bulkheads blowing open as pressure vented into space. He reached his ship, detached, and burned hard away from the doomed vessel. Behind him, the mining ship exploded in a white-blue burst that lit the dead system like a false sunrise. For a moment there was silence. Then Cycron's voice came over, the comes again distorted now, tinged with rage. This is not over, human. You cannot run forever. Cade stared at the fading light of the explosion. I'm not running, he muttered to himself. And somewhere out there, Cycron understood exactly what that meant. The galaxy believed that the blood-borne fleet hunted the human. That was the rumor whispered through every outpost and station along the fringe. Admirals told themselves the trap had failed only because of bad luck, not because their target was impossible to corner. Civilian traders passed the story with a nervous laugh, pretending not to care. But beneath that thin layer of bravado was an unspoken truth. The human wasn't running anymore, and Admiral Cycron was about to learn. What it meant when the prey decided to hunt back. Cade had not left the dead system to hide. He had left too. Disappear not from the galaxy's eyes, but from Cycron's. While the bloodborne fleet searched for him along the obvious routes, Cade slipped into the shadow lanes. The unmapped corridors between trade sectors, the voids where no beacons shone and no traffic dared travel. His ship ran cold, its reactor output lowered to a faint heartbeat, making it almost invisible to long-range scans. For 2 weeks he stalked Cycron's fleet. He learned their patterns, mapped their supply lines. He watched how their escorts rotated, how their refueling schedules worked, and most importantly, how Cycron himself traveled between ships. The Admiral's flagship was a fortress of armor and weapons, but like every fortress, it had gates. Cade's plan didn't start with the flagship. That would be suicide. Instead, he went after its eyes and ears. The first to fall was a communications relay ship stationed on the edge of a nebula. It was lightly armed, relying on the fleet for protection. Cade waited until a storm in the nebula flared, masking his approach. The boarding was silent, quick, and absolute. He left no survivors. The bloodborne fleet never received the next set of orders from Cycron. The second strike came 3 days later, when a munitions transport left dock without full escort. Cade's ship latched on like a predator fish to a drifting whale. By the time the crew realized they were boarded, the cargo hold was already rigged with explosives. He set them off after escaping, turning the transport into a burning beacon in the void. Each time he struck, he left nothing that could be traced directly to him except one thing: a mark. Burned into the hull of every wreck was the same symbol, a crude, white star with a single jagged line through it. No one in Cycron's fleet knew its meaning, but it spread like poison through their ranks. Some thought it was the human's flag. Others thought it was a death mark. All agreed on one thing: when you saw it, you didn't live long. Cycron was furious. He doubled patrols. He increased escort numbers, even sent hunter groups into the shadow lanes, but they came back empty or didn't come back at all. Every move he made, Cade seemed to predict. Every counterstrike failed. The breaking point came when Cade went after something Cycron never thought would be touched: a medical support ship. It was carrying wounded soldiers from the last failed trap. It was heavily shielded with security, drones, and armed guards. But Cade didn't attack it head-on. He disabled its engines with a precision strike, forcing it to call for help. When Cycron's nearest patrol arrived, they found the ship drifting. Its crew unharmed, but all of its navigational data erased, its entire medical database wiped. And that same white star burned into the bridge wall to the rest of the galaxy. The human was becoming a phantom. To Cycron, he was becoming an obsession. The Admiral's pride wouldn't allow him to admit fear, but fear was growing among his officers. They started requesting transfers to safer assignments. Some even abandoned their posts in deep space, disappearing into neutral territory. That was when Cycron made his most dangerous decision yet. He pulled his fleet inward, forming a tight defensive cluster around his flagship. It was exactly what Cade wanted, for all its strength. The defensive fleet in tight formation had one flaw. It was predictable. It had to move as a unit, slow and heavy, to keep its formation. That made it easier to track. Cade didn't plan to break the fleet. Not yet. Instead, he would tear at it piece by piece until Cycron was left exposed. The first piece was a fuel barge that lagged behind during a hyperspace transition. Cade hit it before it could rejoin the fleet, sending its destruction signal straight into Cycron's coms. The Admiral arrived too late to save it, just in time to see the white star burning on the wreckage. The second piece was an escort frigate that strayed too far while scanning an asteroid field. Its crew never saw the human ship until it was too late. The third was a cargo freighter. By now, Cycron's rage had turned cold. This was no longer a chase. This was war on a personal level. And deep down, he knew that every strike was meant to pull him out, to make him move where Cade wanted him. But knowing and stopping it were two very different things. Cade's next move was the boldest yet. Instead of striking from the shadows, he sent a direct message to Cycron's flagship. For words, "You're not the hunter." The message came from inside one of Cycron's own relay buoys. That meant the human had been close, very close, without them knowing. Cycron ordered an immediate fleet-wide lockdown. No ships moved without his direct approval. No comms were transmitted without encryption. But it didn't matter. 2 nights later, The flagship's long-range sensors detected movement in the outer ring of the system they were hiding in. A single ship. Small. Fast its dot. It didn't attack. It didn't transmit. It just hung there, a shadow against the stars, watching. The blood-borne fleet scrambled to intercept, but when they reached the spot, the human was gone. All that remained was another mark burned into a drifting piece of hull plating floating where the ship had been. The white star Cycron didn't sleep after that. And Cade wasn't finished yet. He was already setting the stage for the final part of his plan. One that would force Cycron to come to him alone, without the protection of his fleet. And when that happened, there would be no escape for the Admiral, because the Predator was awake now. It wasn't going back to sleep. The galaxy thought Cade's attacks were random, desperate strikes from a fugitive with nothing left to lose. They didn't see the map he carried in his mind. They didn't hear the silent clock ticking behind his every move. Every fuel barge destroyed, every relay disabled, every escort lost. It wasn't chaos. It was a trail of crumbs leading to one place. Cycron had no idea that he was already walking the path. The Admiral's fleet was wounded, but still dangerous. Even after weeks of losses, it remained a force the galaxy feared to face head-on. That was why Cade knew he couldn't break it in open battle. But Cycron himself, stripped of that armor of steel and men he could be broken, the trick was simple. Make Cycron believe he was on the verge of winning. Cade began with whispers. He hacked a Fringe World's commnet, planting rumors of a crippled human ship limping through a mining belt near the Kareth Rift. He sent false sensor pings along trade routes, painting the same picture: a wounded prey, bleeding fuel, hiding. In a place too small for a fleet to enter without losing formation, it worked. Cycron took the bait without hesitation. The Kareth Rift was a stretch of space thick with jagged rock shards left from a shattered moon. It was too dangerous for heavy ships, but perfect for a small, agile vessel. To Cycron, it was obvious this was where the human would make his last stand. The Admiral made the fatal choice to send only a small hunting party instead of the full fleet. He would lead it himself. That way, when the human's ship was reduced to scrap, he could witness it. He told his officers it was to conserve resources and maintain fleet readiness, but the truth was pride. Pride and obsession. Cade watched the hunting party enter the rift. From a vantage point only he knew existed, a hollowed-out asteroid with a sensor array older than the war itself. He counted the ships, 1 light cruiser, 2 escort corvettes. And Cycron's personal command craft, small enough to navigate the rift, small enough to be alone. Perfect. He didn't attack immediately. Instead, he let them hunt. He let them scan false energy trails he had laid out days before. He let them burn fuel, chasing shadows. And the deeper they went, the more the rift closed around them. The jagged rocks grew denser, forcing them to slow their engines, weaving through like prey caught in a snare. When the moment came, it was silent. Cade's first strike didn't even involve weapons. He detonated a series of small charges he had planted in key asteroid positions earlier, sending clouds of debris into the rift's narrow corridors. The corvettes were trapped first, pinned in by collapsing rock. The cruiser tried to maneuver, but its hull scraped against a shard of moonstone, leaving a deep scar across its flank. Cycron's command craft pressed forward, unaware, refusing to believe that the human was still ahead of them. Then Cade's ship appeared. It didn't come from the front, Cycron expected. It rose from beneath the shadow of a massive asteroid, its hull cold and dark until the engines roared to life. The white star symbol blazed across its prow like a challenge. Cycron's voice cut across open comms. Should have kept running. Cade didn't answer. Words were pointless now. This was the moment the trail of crumbs had been leading to. The first salvo from Cycron's ship lit the rift in white fire. Cade dodged between rock pillars, letting the blasts shatter stone instead of steel. He wasn't trying to win the fight. Here, not yet. He was pulling Cycron deeper, closer to the real trap. A narrow tunnel opened ahead, just wide enough for one ship. Cade dove into it. Cycron followed without hesitation. Inside, the walls closed tight, lit only by the faint blue glow of reactor wash. The human ship moved like it belonged there. Cycron's ship didn't. It scraped, it shuddered, but it kept coming. Halfway through the tunnel, Cade cut his engines. Cycron's sensors blared a warning just as the charges detonated. The blast didn't destroy the Admiral's ship, it sealed. The tunnel behind them was no turning back now. They emerged into a cavern the size of a city, lit by the burning remnants of an ancient mining station. It was here that Cade finally turned to face him. The battle that followed was not a quick one. Cycron's ship was faster, better armed, and shielded by military-grade armor. Cade's advantage was the terrain, jagged spires of rock pockets, of gas that distorted sensors, and decades-old wreckage that could hide a ship for seconds at a time. Seconds were all Cade needed. He struck from every angle, never staying in sight for more than a heartbeat. Each hit tore something vital from Cycron's ship maneuvering thrusters, sensor arrays, shield emitters. The Admiral fired back relentlessly. But every shot missed or struck empty rock. Finally, with his ship bleeding power and his crew screaming for orders, Cycron tried to flee. That was when Cade hit him with the one weapon he had been saving since the war began, a kinetic lance. Old tech from Earth's first space wars. No energy shielding could stop it. The lance tore through the command craft's engine block, leaving it dead in the water. The fight was over, but Cade didn't finish it. Not yet. He opened comms for the first time. "You think this is about you?" "Admiral." His voice was calm, almost cold. "It's about every station you burned, every civilian convoy you destroyed, every name you don't even remember." Cycron spat back through static. "Kill me, then." Cade's reply was simple. "Not yet." Transmitted coordinates to the Admiral's remaining fleet. Then he left the rift, vanishing into the void before reinforcements could arrive. When Cycron's fleet finally recovered their Admiral, they found him alive, but beaten not by weapons, but by the knowledge that the human had spared him. The White Star was burned into the command chair of his ship, and every officer who saw it understood the message. This wasn't over. The galaxy had started speaking his name in whispers. Not Cade. Not the man, just the human. Every system that had crossed his path carried the same mark. Destroyed supply lines, crippled warships, outposts left in silence. The stories spread. Faster than the truth? Some said he could vanish into shadows between stars. Others swore he had help from ancient machines buried deep in forgotten worlds. The truth was far simpler: rage, patience, and a mind that refused to stop hunting. But Cade knew his work wasn't done. Cycron still lived. The Admiral had been pulled from the wreckage of his command craft, humiliated but breathing. For Cade, that was intentional. A living enemy carried fear farther than a dead one. Still, there was a line he had promised himself from the very start: there would come a day when Cycron's voice would go silent forever. That day had come. Through weeks of careful infiltration, Cade tracked the remnants of Cycron's fleet. They had limped away from the Kareth Rift and gathered in the shadow of an abandoned ring station orbiting Vornus Prime. It was a fortress now, repaired and rearmed by whatever resources the shattered fleet could still scrape together. 1,000 guns pointed outward, daring anyone to approach. That was exactly what Cade intended to do, but he didn't come in guns blazing. The attack began in the quietest way possible, by turning the station's own systems against itself. For 3 nights, Cade ghosted in and out of the sensor blind spots, attaching remote scramblers and worming ancient code into the station's power network. When the night of the strike came, the first thing the defenders noticed was nothing. The station's lights still glowed, its shields still hummed, its fleet still hung in perfect formation. And then, without warning, the shields collapsed, not flickered. Collapsed the first barrage came a heartbeat later. Cade's ship screamed in from the dark, engines roaring hot white, cannons tearing into the nearest escort frigate before it could even power up its weapons. The frigate split in half, venting crew into the cold. Panic spread through the fleet. Like fire in dry grass, Cycron's voice cut across the chaos. "All ships, converge. Force him into the ring's kill zone. But Cade didn't run from the kill zone. He dove into it. The ring station's guns woke, filling the void with spears of plasma and railshot. Cade's ship weaved between the blasts, each maneuver impossibly tight, each evasion a thread between death and survival. His counterfire wasn't random, it was surgical. He targeted the station's gun relays first, blowing out entire banks of turrets with a few precision hits. The defenders realized too late that they weren't fighting a wild animal. They were fighting a predator that had mapped every weakness before the first shot was fired. The battle bent in his favor. One by one, the outer ships fell, some exploding in silent bursts of light, others drifting powerless, their crews surrendering before the inevitable. Every kill pushed Cade closer to the station's heart, to the command deck where Cycron waited. But the Admiral was no coward. As Cade's ship breached the station's outer ring, Cycron abandoned his chair and took the fight directly to the docking bay. His personal guard veterans of campaigns that had broken empires formed a wall of steel and rifles at his side. Cade came through the breach without hesitation. He didn't wear full armor, just the light combat gear of someone who trusted. Speed over bulk. His rifle barked once, twice, 3 times each shot, finding a target before they even realized he had moved. The fight inside was fast, brutal, and close enough to taste the scorched air. Cycron's guards fought like they believed in him, but Cade's rage was older, heavier, and sharper than loyalty. In less than a minute, the bay floor was littered with bodies. That was when Cade and Cycron stood face to face for the second and final time. All this death, Cycron growled, his voice a low rumble under the fire alarms. For revenge? Cade's eyes didn't waver. For justice, they moved at the same time. Cycron swung first, a heavy 2-handed blade, fast despite its size. Cade slid under it, answering with a short, brutal strike to the Admiral's side. Armor split. Blood followed. Cycron staggered but didn't fall. He came again, this time aiming for Cade's head. The human caught the blade on his rifle's frame, letting the metal grind against the barrel before twisting it free. The counterstrike drove the butt of the rifle into Cycron's jaw, snapping his head back. The fight ended with one clean motion. Cade drew the combat knife from his belt and drove it through the Admiral's chest plate, deep enough that the point scraped the deck. Behind him, Cycron's eyes widened. For the first time, Cade saw something other than rage or arrogance in them. It was recognition. You. The Admiral choked, were always the real weapon. Cade pulled the blade free, letting Cycron fall without another word. The alarm still screamed, but the station's guns had gone silent. The surviving fleet was scattering, breaking apart without their leader's orders. Cade moved back to his ship without looking over his shoulder. Once clear of the station, he sent a single transmission to every channel in range, a simple image of the white star, bright against the void. No threats. No speeches. Just a mark. That would live in the minds of every soldier and officer who saw it. The message was clear. The war wasn't over, but for Cycron, it was.